You're listening to This Week in America with Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast. This Week in America online at thisweekinamerica.us. Delivered on Christmas from Dean McFalls is described as original, creative, inspiring, and fun. The engaging book is an anthology of poetry, verse, art, humor, history, and spirituality, a journey of faith through two decades that changed the world. Dean was raised in Seattle. He served as an educator, missionary, and international activist in citizen diplomacy and issues of justice, poverty, and peace, a writer of over 400 articles, a Roman Catholic priest, and since 2015 a married man, the father of a son who he calls Heaven Sent. Dean McFalls, author of Delivered on Christmas, our guest on today's This Week in America. Dean, great to have you with us on the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Rick. It's great to be here with you.
So much to talk about on the program today, and in just a second, we'll talk about the excellent book that you have, Delivered on Christmas. I read a little bit of the background. You really have really devoted your life to ministry, haven't you? A number of social issues, cultural issues that you've actively been involved in, still involved in.
Since my earliest youth, I always felt the presence of God. I always felt that I was here on earth for a purpose. When I was 10 years old, I was involved in a serious car accident and I was thrown out of the car, but I was unhurt. My cousin was 10 years old, lived in California. He was in a car accident the same year and died. So ever since then, I thought, well, I'm here for a reason, and I do my best to find out what God wants me to do.
And you've been so active in your life, and we will talk about that during the course of the program. I encourage you to go to Dean's website, deanmcfalls.com. It's a very inspiring website designed for all of us. Young people especially are welcome there. A lot of great information. You've worked with at-risk youth, all the different social groups that I talked about, and we'll mention those during the course of the program. It's Christmas time, and you've done a really unique Christmas book, Delivered on Christmas. Talk about that book, because this basically, I understand, about 40 years in the making to come up with this book, and a lot of this goes back to your fascination with The Night Before Christmas. Talk about the genesis, where this idea came from.
My ancestor was named Anne Bradstreet. She was the first published poet in English from the American colonies and was a Puritan with 8 children. My grandfather, my father, even my aunt on my grandma's side were all into poetry and verse. So it's in our blood. But I have been on many journeys in life, have had great experiences. And so every year I would try to bring them all together and synthesize them in the form of a verse. And the verse was always patterned after The Night Before Christmas. There's something very special about that. That same meter that we find in the story, The Night Before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring except for, not even a mouse, that is. That same meter structure was used a lot by Dr. Seuss, for example, in Yertle the Turtle. It's a kind of meter that's like a galloping horse. It just drives you on and on and on.
Yes.
So it lends itself to telling epic stories. And I did 16 epic stories based on that verse, covering a wide variety of topics and issues.
It's interesting, and the book is Delivered on Christmas. Dean McFalls, our guest. His website is deanmcfalls.com. One review said, the book made me feel a wonderful range of positive emotions as an author, knowing what you're attempting to do with this book. That has to be a high compliment, isn't it?
It is, except for the fact that the book exists to drive to the heart of a number of the most critical issues that we face as human beings. Issues that were not only in play 40 years ago, 50 years ago, but today. Issues of war and peace, of despair, of tremendous loss in life, of immigration and justice and peace. All these issues are treated in the 15 episodes of the book. And some of them are very light and funny, but some of them go extremely deep. And that's why it takes a while to read the book and digest it.
Yeah, and they mentioned about the emotions, because there is a range of emotions that you touch on in the book, Delivered on Christmas. Dean McFalls, our guest on the program. I mentioned in the beginning, and I love the way the book is organized. You deal with 2 pivotal decades. Talk about the decades and why you chose to do it that way.
Rick, you might be able to relate to this, that I grew up during the Cold War era, duck and cover.
Yep.
The Vietnam War as well, but a constant fear of what the Russians might do. I lived in Seattle, not too far from the Bering Strait. I also watched some of my heroes die. I was in third grade when we watched a live broadcast of President John F. Kennedy's assassination. Later, Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. My heroes like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and others were dying. Meanwhile, kids were coming back from the Vietnam War, either in body bags or, deeply wounded. So the world seemed to be disintegrating around us in the 70s, even though we were idealistic. Remember the time of Woodstock, flower girls. My idea was that we have to find something deep, rock solid on which to found our lives, because the world around us seems to be falling apart.
And you do that so well in Delivered on Christmas. Dean McFalls, our guest on the program, book available where books are sold. You'll find information and can order the book at Dean's website, deanmcfalls.com. And really, there's something in the book for everybody, isn't there? It's hard to say,
Absolutely.
okay, this is designed specifically for this group. There's something for everybody in the book.
Everybody. I mean, it starts with the most corny one. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the villa, not a creature was stirring, except for Godzilla. The children were hid in the chimney with care, in hope that the monster would not find them there, while Ma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down with a club in our lap, when what to our wondering eyes should appear but a huge set of teeth and a throat to the rear. Now that's the most silly one, but it does have to do with the fear that things are going to happen and go wrong very fast. But later on, they get very, very deep, and you're right. I try to help people find way through issues. Rick, our nation is in deep, deep, dire straits. We are a nation that are far from God, and even though we say one nation under God, in fact, we're living as if God did not exist. Now we're reaping the consequences of this. There's widespread despair, addiction, human trafficking, pornography, violence on our streets, the mass shootings that make no sense whatsoever. And of course, our politics have been crumbling apart because there's a lack of civility, a lack of dialogue. This is something that has to be rebuilt from the base in our nation. We need to found ourselves or build ourselves once again. And I believe that has to be on the rock of faith. It doesn't really matter if a person has a different religious persuasion than me. That's up to that person. But we need God. Just like the 12-step program says, we're incapable of fixing our problems. We need to rely on a higher power.
And that's been so much of your life in dealing with those issues, and you do them in such an entertaining way in the book, Delivered on Christmas. Dean McFalls, our guest on the program. I mentioned the fact that you are an author, a number of projects that you've worked on and are working on. One is Dear Gabriel, A Father's Legacy. Talk about that. I mentioned before that you considered your son to be a gift from God, heaven sent. Talk about the impact that Gabriel has had on you and being able to express that in the book.
Gabriel is not named Gabriel by accident. He's a child sent from heaven, and he brought us good tidings of God's love for us. I was 58 years old when Gabriel came to life, and at that time I was active in the priestly ministry, so I was guilty, you could say, of committing an unfaithfulness to my vows. But the child that came from this, even though it changed my life radically, has been the single greatest gift and the greatest project, you might say, or ministry of my life. Nothing that I did, whether I was overseas, whether I worked with gang members, whether I was doing deliverance ministry or healing ministry, or the constant confessions I heard, nothing seems to touch the beauty and the power of raising this child. And he is definitely a blessed and anointed kid.
And talk about the impact on your mission, which obviously is continuing to this day, but the fact that you've got this son, this 5-year-old, your flesh and blood, what you're doing is trying to make the world a better place for him, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I always cared about kids. I've been teaching in public schools now for 4 years. I've worked with Head Start children and families, but I am very deeply concerned not only about the world our children are going to face, but whether or not our children are equipped to face that world. That's why I wrote Dear Gabriel. It's a 5-volume series on how a kid can process this complex and crumbling world in which they find themselves, in which there's so much conflict of values and so much disagreement about what is the truth. So the book draws on the great legacy we have from the Greeks, from the religious traditions of the world, from the arts and music? What is it that we already have at our fingertips and through the internet so easily to access that can help our kids find their way and process the complexity of the world and come to the truth? Because in the end, that's what matters, finding and living the truth.
Information on that book, of course, at Dean's website, deanmcfalls.com. You can click on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You've got some upcoming books, some that are very interesting. Talk about those, and you talk a lot about, in the one book, the Catholic Church and a Roman Catholic priest at one time. Talk about that book, because this is sort of a common sense approach to a problem that's back in the news.
Absolutely, Rick. This is so relevant to today, but it's something I've struggled with ever since the day I started to become Catholic. I was drawn to the priesthood and to the ministry early on. At the age of 25, I joined the Catholic Church, but at that moment, the Lord started sending women into my life that were absolutely great, fantastic people. And it confused me for a long time. I kept saying, Lord, are you testing me? Are you playing games with me? Is this the devil? What's going on here? But it finally became clear to me over the years that I was being called to marry, and I was called to the priesthood. And I wish the Roman Catholic hierarchy and authorities would understand this, that God does have the right, and we should offer God the freedom to call a person both to married life and the ministry. We do have some priests in the United States that have come from other religious traditions and are married. And we have, of course, the Eastern Rite churches, many of them, in which the priests are able to marry and serve in the sacraments. But in the Roman Catholic Church of the West, the Latin Rite, this has been largely impossible for 1,000 years. The time has come, Rick, without a single doubt in my mind, the time is here for the church to allow for the option for some priests at least to be family men and to serve the church that way. That's why I'm writing the book called 25 Common Sense Reasons Why the Catholic Church Should Allow for Married Priests. I'm writing a book called Called to be a Father, which has a double meaning, and also Another Kind of Father, which will be a chronicle of my experience since I left the active ministry. I'm not attacking the Catholic Church. I'm a practicing Catholic. I go to Mass almost daily. We pray the Rosary. We love our Blessed Mother. We love our Pope Francis. But I'm definitely one who will advocate, and if I have to be an irritant, I will be that way, because it's time for us to get this straight. The whole issue, Rick, has to do with priesthood and sexuality. And I don't need to say more about that because it's out there in the news every day.
Every day you pick it up and you just you almost get numb to it after a while, that here's another story. And I say that in a sense where you certainly regret that, because these are issues that have to be dealt with in a forthright, honest manner. The books that Dean talking about, you can find the progress of those listed on his website, deanmcfalls.com. Information there, a great time of year for the book delivered on Christmas. A few minutes left in the program. I want to talk about, you go to the website, you're really asking for people's support, for people's prayers. This writing is not something you're doing to become a very wealthy man. You're doing it, you're writing on topics of substance. Talk about that, how people can pray for you, how people can support your writings and the message that you want so desperately to get out there.
Thank you, Rick, for bringing this up. It has not been easy to live in the same parish community, the same neighborhood, which I served since 1995 as a priest. People have treated us very well, but it's not been easy in terms of employment. Shortly after I went public with my message about going to have a child and take responsibility for him, I was trashed in a slander by one of our local television outlets, and that was picked up by the New York Daily News and by the UK Daily Mail. So it's been on the internet for 5 years now. That has severely undermined and damaged my prospects to get the kind of employment that I need and for which I'm equipped. So we're struggling. I ask for prayers. The book, Dear Gabriel, and the other books that I mentioned do not have a publishing house yet. I'm going to start self-publishing 2 of them. So I need a publisher out there who has the courage, the vision, and the insight to understand that what I have to offer will not only be marketable, but it will be extremely valuable. There's so many books out there now about vampires, about witchcraft, about stuff that really doesn't matter and doesn't improve the life of our children. I'm trying to put stuff out there that's substantial. If there's anyone hears this and wants to get on board with me, I would appreciate it. Let me tell you about a friend of mine. His name is Vincent Doyle. He's the first person to really come forward and support me that represents an organization. It's called Coping International. It's an international association of children of Catholic priests. So our son Gabriel automatically belongs to them. And he reached out to me and he thanked me for having taken responsibility for our son. I want to say that Vincent's sick right now. Pray for him. But he's doing a great ministry, and I'm going to collaborate with him. One day I hope that Vincent and I and our son Gabriel can speak to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and tell them our story. Until then, I need a lot of support. If anyone has any ideas, please get in touch with me.
And you can do that very easily. Dean McFalls, McFalls.com, DeanMcFalls.com. Very easy to get to, easy to remember. If you can't, forget it. If you forget it, just go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on directly. A couple minutes left in the program. The time has gone by so quickly in having you with us on the program here today. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing. You're writing the books, but I understand you have this opportunity to get back in the ministry with a church there in your local area, with a hospital in your local area.
Yes. Rick, can you still see me?
Yes, I can. Look good.
Good. Opportunity just opened up for me yesterday of going into 18 months of intensive preparation and internship for a hospital chaplaincy. I have wanted to go back into ministry, and this looks like an open door. So I'm putting up my prayers to God that this will work out. It'll be an opportunity to become a hospital chaplain. Yeah, that will require some support from the Catholic hierarchy. So I'll have some kind of status as a minister. We'll see what happens.
Well, that will continue the critical mission that you're on of issues that impact humanity, and you're doing such an excellent job out there and have for a number of years. The book, great this time of year. I keep mentioning that because now is the time, and the book offers so much. Delivered on Christmas. Dean McFalls, the author. His website is DeanMcFalls.com. What kind of response do you get to the book? I mentioned the one review where they really were impressed. It's highly reviewed everywhere that I've looked. What's it like getting that response on the book? It seems like you're accomplishing what you set out to do, which is to get us to celebrate the season, celebrate what Christmas is all about, and motivating people to follow in that journey.
Rick, everyone that's read the book has told me that they think it's fantastic and they found something inspiring or challenging or encouraging for themselves. I wish more people would simply go on Amazon or Barnes & Noble and post reviews, because it is reviews that drives the loyalty of a publishing house or more readership. Unfortunately, people wait around to find out what someone else says or does before they act nowadays. I just want to encourage people, don't wait for someone to review it for you. Just get the book. You can buy it on Amazon cheaply, or if you want a signed copy, dedicated copy, contact me through the website, and I'll get you one. I guarantee if you take time with the book, you'll love it. I guarantee it.
And then take a few more minutes, do a review, because the reviews are very important in this particular case for Dean to be able to go ahead and get the word out there on the other books that he's working on. Delivered on Christmas is the book. You'll find at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, information at Dean's website, DeanMcFalls.com. Dean, a pleasure to have you on the program. Excellent job with the book. So much you've done in life. I'm excited that you're going back and we'll be able to do some ministry work once again. Thank you for being with us on the program.
Thanks, Rick, and I want to thank the people from Brandy Nemo for putting me in contact with you. It's been great to meet you. I hope that we can talk again sometime.
We definitely will do that. Dean McFalls, our guest. The website is DeanMcFalls.com. The book we're talking about, just one of many that Dean is either published or working on, Delivered on Christmas. Dean McFalls, our guest. And all the information you'll find and link on directly to Dean by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Back on today's program after these messages.